I've been on this earth for 94 years, and I'm going to tell you something most people don't realize until it's far too late. A long life isn't built by what you add, it's shaped by what you finally have the courage to let go of. People spend their whole lives chasing the next habit, the next routine, the next miracle solution, thinking that's the answer. But I've buried people who did everything right on paper, ate the right foods, took the right pills, followed all the advice, and they still left this world earlier than they should have. And do you know what I noticed? Sitting in those quiet rooms, watching families cry, listening to stories about who they used to be, it wasn't what they failed to start that took them down. It was what they refused to stop. My name doesn't matter as much as what I've seen. I've watched time take people slowly, and I've watched it take them all at once. I've stood at more graves than I can count, and after a while, patterns begin to show themselves whether you want to see them or not. The truth is, most people don't lose their lives in one dramatic moment. They lose it in small, repeated ways. Daily habits, quiet decisions, things that feel harmless, things that feel normal, things everyone else is doing. That's what makes it so dangerous. Because when something feels normal, you stop questioning it. And when you stop questioning it, you stop noticing what it's costing you. There was a time when I thought just like that. I thought life was something you could figure out later, that the body would forgive you, that the mind would recover, that time was generous. I believed I could hold on to certain habits because they comforted me, because they were familiar, because everyone around me did the same. But life has a way of correcting you, not with warnings, but with consequences. And by the time most people finally understand what's happening, they're already too far down the road to turn around easily. That's why I'm speaking to you like this, plain and direct. Not to scare you, but to wake you up just enough to see clearly. Because one of the things I'm going to share with you today, maybe more than one, is something you're doing right now. Something that feels small. Something you've told yourself isn't a big deal. And I want you to understand, these aren't just habits. They are slow decisions. And slow decisions shape fast endings. The first thing I had to learn to stop was eating late into the night. Now that might sound simple, almost too simple to matter. I used to think the same way. After a long day, I'd sit down, turn on the television, and have just a little something. Nothing big, just enough to feel satisfied. A few bites here, a small treat there. It felt like a reward, like I had earned it. And for years, I never questioned it, because nothing terrible happened right away. That's the trick, you see. The damage doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly. But over time, I started waking up feeling different. Not sick, not exactly, just off. Slower, heavier. My body felt like it was working against me instead of with me. My sleep wasn't deep anymore. My mind wasn't clear. And I remember thinking, this is just what getting older feels like. That's what people tell you, and you believe it because it sounds reasonable. But it wasn't age. It was accumulation. It was years of not letting my body rest the way it needed to. One evening, I decided to stop. No big announcement. No dramatic plan. I just said after a certain hour, I'm done. And I kept it simple. If the sun was down, the kitchen was closed. The first few nights felt strange. My body expected something. My mind kept suggesting I deserved just a little more. But I stayed with it. And within weeks, something shifted. I started waking up lighter, clearer, not just in my body. It felt like I had given my system the space it had been asking for all along. You have to understand, your body is always working for you, even when you're not paying attention. But it can only do so much if you never give it a break. When you keep feeding it late into the night, you're asking it to stay busy when it's supposed to be repairing. It's like asking someone to clean a house while you keep dragging in more dirt. Eventually, something gives, and it's usually your energy, your clarity, or your health. Most people won't take this seriously because it sounds too easy. They're looking for something complicated, something new, something they haven't heard before. But the truth is often simple, and simple doesn't mean weak. It means overlooked. And the things people overlook are often the things that cost them the most over time. I'm not telling you this because I read it somewhere. I'm telling you because I lived both sides of it. I lived the years of ignoring it, and I've lived the years of respecting it. And I can tell you without hesitation, the difference is not small. It's the difference between dragging yourself through the day and actually feeling present in it. And that's just one thing. Just one. Imagine how many others are quietly shaping your life right now, without you even realizing it. The second thing I had to learn to stop was something that felt, at the time, like strength. It felt like intelligence. It even felt like responsibility. And that was the habit of arguing with people who had no interest in understanding. I used to believe that if someone was wrong, it was my duty to correct them. If someone spoke with confidence, but without truth, I felt almost pulled to step in, to explain, to prove, to win. And I was good at it too. I could hold my ground. I could out-talk most people. I could make a point so clearly that there was no room left for doubt. But here's what I didn't realize back then. Winning an argument is not the same as improving your life. There is a cost to constantly putting yourself in conflict, and it's not always visible right away. It shows up in your body first, in the tightness of your chest, in the way your thoughts keep replaying conversations long after they're over, in the way your mind refuses to settle, always preparing for the next disagreement, the next moment where you feel the need to defend, to prove, to stand your ground. I carried that energy for years, thinking it meant I was sharp, that I was engaged, that I was not someone who could be walked over. But in truth, I was exhausting myself over people who had already decided not to change. There was a man I used to know, a neighbor of mine. We would get into these long discussions, and they always turned into arguments. Politics, life, values, you name it. Every conversation became a contest. And I would leave those conversations feeling drained, but also strangely satisfied, like I had done something important. One day, after one of those arguments, I realized something that changed me. Not a single thing about his thinking had shifted. Not 1 inch. All that energy, all that time, all that tension, and nothing had moved. That's when it hit me. I wasn't having conversations. I was engaging in cycles. Cycles will wear you down faster than almost anything else, because they feel active but they lead nowhere. They give you the illusion of progress without any real change. And the longer you stay in them, the more they become part of your identity. You start to think, this is just who I am. Someone who speaks up, someone who doesn't let things slide. But there's a difference between having a voice and wasting it. So I made a decision, a quiet one, but a firm one. I stopped arguing with people who were committed to misunderstanding. And let me tell you, that's harder than it sounds. Because your ego will fight you. It will tell you that staying silent means losing, that walking away means you're weak, that not correcting someone means you're allowing wrong things to exist. That's attachment. The first time I chose not to engage, it felt unnatural. Someone said something I disagreed with strongly, something I would have normally challenged immediately, and I just let it pass. I nodded, I stayed quiet, and I moved on. And do you know what happened? Nothing. The world didn't collapse. The conversation ended. And for the first time in a long while, my mind stayed calm afterward. No replaying, no tension, just quiet. That's when I understood something most people never realize. Peace is not something you find. It's something you protect. And one of the fastest ways to lose it is by giving your energy to people who don't value it. Not every opinion deserves your response. Not every disagreement deserves your time. And not every person is open to change, no matter how clear you make your point. Over the years, I've seen how this one habit alone can shape a person's life. People who are always in conflict rarely look at ease. Their faces carry it. Their posture carries it. Their sleep carries it. They might think they're standing strong, but what they're really doing is standing in the same place, over and over again, burning energy without moving forward. When you let go of the need to win every argument, something opens up inside you. You start to choose where your attention goes. You start to notice how much of your life was being spent in unnecessary tension. And slowly, you begin to redirect that energy into things that actually matter. Your health, your relationships, your own peace of mind. I'm not saying you should never speak up. There are moments that require clarity, honesty, and even confrontation. But those moments are fewer than you think. Most of what people argue about day to day has no lasting impact. It just fills time and drains energy. And energy once spent is not something you get back easily. If you want a long life, not just in years but in quality, you have to become selective. Selective with your habits, with your attention, and especially with your reactions. And those decisions, repeated over time, become the shape of your life. I didn't gain anything by arguing all those years, but I gained a great deal when I stopped. I gained quiet. I gained clarity. And most importantly, I gained time. Time that I no longer wasted trying to change people who were never asking to be changed. And just like with the first habit, this one doesn't seem dangerous at first. It feels normal. It feels justified. But the things that feel the most justified are often the ones we question the least. And those are the ones that stay with us the longest. The third thing I had to learn to stop was sitting for most of my day without even realizing how much of my life was being spent that way. Now, I'm not talking about exercise in the way people think of it today. I never had a gym membership, never followed a routine, never counted steps, or tracked anything on a device. What I'm talking about is something far more ordinary, and because of that, far more dangerous. It's the quiet habit of staying still for too long and calling it rest. There was a time when my days became smaller without me noticing. I would wake up, move through my morning, and then settle into a chair. One task would turn into another, and before I knew it, hours had passed with very little movement. It didn't feel wrong. In fact, it felt deserved. After all, I had worked hard most of my life. I told myself I had earned the right to slow down, and there is truth in that, but there is also a line, and I had crossed it without realizing. I remember my husband very clearly during those years. He had his favorite chair, a recliner by the window. Every morning he would sit down with his coffee, and that's where he stayed for most of the day. Television, newspaper, small naps in between. He wasn't lazy. He had simply fallen into a rhythm that felt comfortable, familiar, safe. But comfort, when it turns into stillness for too long, begins to take more than it gives. Over time, I started to notice small changes in both of us. Getting up became a little slower. Walking felt a little heavier. There was a stiffness that didn't used to be there. At first, it seemed like a natural part of getting older. That's what everyone says, so you accept it. But deep down, something didn't feel right. It felt like we were fading in a way that didn't have to happen so quickly. The truth became clear to me in a quiet moment, not a dramatic one. I was standing in the kitchen, holding onto the counter for just a second longer than I needed to, and I realized that my body wasn't asking for rest. It was reacting to neglect. There's a difference. Rest restores you. Neglect slowly weakens you, and I had been calling one by the name of the other. So I made a change, and just like before, it wasn't complicated. I didn't create a plan or set goals. I simply decided that I would not stay still for too long. If I had been sitting for a while, I would stand. If I was standing, I would take a few steps. I started walking to places I would have normally avoided. The mailbox, the garden, even small trips around the house that I used to think weren't worth the effort. And at first, it felt like nothing, too small to matter. But small things, when done consistently, begin to add up in ways you don't expect. Within a few weeks, I noticed a shift. My body felt more awake, not younger, but more responsive. There was less stiffness, less resistance, and more importantly, I felt a kind of independence that had quietly started to slip away before. Movement isn't just about muscles and joints. It's about maintaining your ability to live your life without relying on others for every little thing. I watched what happened to my husband as the years went on, and it broke my heart in ways I didn't fully understand at the time. The less he moved, the harder it became to start again, and the harder it became, the less he wanted to try. It's a cycle, just like the arguments I told you about earlier, except this one happens in your body. Stillness leads to weakness. Weakness leads to more stillness, and before you know it, your world becomes smaller than it needs to be. He passed at 71, and I've had many years since then to think about what might have been different. I'm not saying movement would have changed everything. Life is more complicated than that, but I know with a certainty that only comes from watching it unfold, that it would have given him more time, or at the very least, better time. Your body is designed to move, not in extreme ways, not in punishing ways, but in steady, consistent ways. When you stop honoring that, your body doesn't stop immediately. It adapts. It compensates. It tries to keep you going. But over time, those adjustments come at a cost. And that cost shows up as pain, fatigue, and limitation. Most people think they need a big change to fix this. They think they need a full routine, a schedule, a system. And when they can't maintain that, they give up entirely. But that's the wrong approach. The truth is much simpler and much more forgiving. You just need to move more than you did yesterday. Stand when you would normally sit. Walk when you would normally stay still. Stretch when you feel tight instead of ignoring it. It doesn't sound impressive. It won't make anyone look at you and think you've transformed your life overnight. But it will change something much more important. It will change the direction you're heading in. And direction, over time, matters far more than intensity. I didn't save my body by pushing it harder. I helped it by neglecting it less. And that's something anyone can begin doing, no matter their age, no matter their condition. Because the moment you choose to move, even just a little, you are choosing not to let stillness decide your future. The fourth thing I had to learn to stop was holding on to pain long after the moment had passed. And I don't mean the kind of pain you feel in your body. I mean the kind that sits quietly in your chest, in your thoughts, in your memories. The kind that doesn't go away just because time moves forward. That kind of pain has a way of settling in, making itself at home, becoming part of how you see the world, without you even noticing it happening. I carried something like that for many years. It was tied to someone I loved, someone I trusted, someone I never thought would hurt me the way they did. And when it happened, it didn't just sting for a moment. It changed how I felt when I woke up. It changed how I spoke. It changed how I trusted. I told myself I had every right to hold on to it. When someone does you wrong, especially deeply wrong, letting go can feel like letting them off the hook. So I held on to it, not loudly, not in a way others could always see, but quietly. I would think about it at night. I would replay it in my mind, imagining what I should have said, what I could have done differently. I built whole conversations in my head that never happened, and every time I did that, I felt that same weight all over again. It was like picking up the same stone day after day and placing it back into my pocket before I went about my life. Years went by like that, and from the outside, everything looked normal. I continued living, continued speaking, continued showing up where I needed to be. But inside, there was a tightness that never really left, a kind of quiet bitterness that followed me into moments that had nothing to do with the original hurt. That's the part people don't talk about. Pain doesn't stay contained. It spreads. It changes how you respond to things that don't deserve that reaction. The realization came to me slowly, not all at once. I began to notice that the person who had hurt me had moved on. They were living their life, laughing, sleeping peacefully, not carrying what I was carrying. And that was a difficult truth to face, because it meant that the weight I was holding on to was no longer connected to them. It was something I was choosing to keep. That's when I understood something that took me far too long to see clearly. Holding on to pain does not protect you. It does not balance the scales. It does not make things right. All it does is keep you tied to a moment that has already passed. And the longer you hold on to it, the more of your present it begins to take. So one day I made a decision, not because I suddenly felt ready, but because I realized I might never feel ready. I reached out. My voice wasn't strong. My words weren't perfect, but they were honest. I said what I needed to say, and more importantly, I said the words I had been resisting for years. I forgive you. Now, forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it means forgetting, or pretending something didn't happen, or allowing the same behavior to continue. That's not what it is. Forgiveness is a release. It's a decision to stop carrying something that is no longer serving you. It's choosing your own peace over your attachment to being right about your pain. After that conversation, something shifted in me that I can only describe as lightness. Not happiness, not joy in that moment, but relief. The kind of relief you feel when you finally set something down that you didn't realize was exhausting you as much as it was. And over time, that relief turned into something even more valuable. It turned into space. Space in my thoughts, space in my heart, space in how I move through my days. Your body feels what your mind holds on to. That's not just a saying, it's something I've lived. The tension, the stress, the constant replaying of hurtful moments, it doesn't just stay in your thoughts. It shows up in your sleep, in your energy, in your health. You can try to ignore it, but your body keeps the record. Most people don't let go because they think they're holding someone else accountable. But in truth, they're holding themselves in place. And time doesn't stop while you do that. Life continues moving, whether you're ready or not. The question is, are you moving with it, or are you staying tied to something that already took enough from you? Letting go doesn't mean what happened was acceptable. It means you've decided it won't define the rest of your life. And that decision is one of the most powerful ones you can make, not because it changes the past, but because it frees your future. I lost years to something I thought I was justified in holding on to. Years where I could have felt lighter, calmer, more present. And if I could go back, that is one of the things I would change without hesitation. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because carrying it for so long only created more of it. You don't need the other person to apologize the way you want them to. You don't need the situation to resolve perfectly. You only need to decide that your peace matters more than your attachment to the hurt. And once you make that decision, truly make it, you'll begin to understand just how much of your life was waiting on the other side of that weight. The fifth thing I had to learn to stop was filling my mind with noise right before I asked it to rest. And for many years, I didn't even recognize it as a problem, because it looked like something everyone else was doing. Every evening, I would sit down, turn on the television, and let the day end with whatever was being broadcast into my home. News, mostly. Stories of conflict, fear, disaster, people arguing, people shouting, things going wrong in places I had never even been. And I told myself I was staying informed, that it was important to know what was happening in the world. But what I didn't understand at the time was that knowing something and carrying it are two very different things. I wasn't just hearing the news, I was absorbing it. I was taking it into my mind right before sleep, letting it settle into my thoughts, letting it shape the way my body felt as I lay there in the dark. And night after night, I noticed the same pattern. My body was still, but my mind wasn't. It kept moving, replaying what I had seen, what I had heard, what could go wrong, what might happen next. Sleep is not just about closing your eyes, it's about letting your system settle, and I was doing the exact opposite. I was feeding it tension, then expecting peace. I was giving it noise, then asking for quiet. And over time, that mismatch began to show itself in ways I couldn't ignore. I would wake up feeling tired, even after hours in bed. My thoughts felt crowded before the day had even begun. There was a subtle heaviness that followed me, and I couldn't quite explain where it was coming from. The change didn't happen all at once. It started with a small decision, just like the others. One evening, I turned the television off earlier than usual. The house felt different immediately, quieter, almost too quiet at first. I sat there, not quite sure what to do with the silence. And that's when I realized how used I had become to constant input. Silence had started to feel unfamiliar. So, I replaced the noise with something gentler. I would read a few pages of a book. Sometimes I would sit and think. Sometimes I would pray. Nothing complicated, nothing structured. Just something that didn't agitate my mind. And within a short time, my nights began to change. I fell asleep more easily. I stayed asleep. And when I woke up, there was a clarity that hadn't been there before. Your mind needs a transition, just like your body does. You wouldn't run as fast as you can and then expect your heart to immediately slow down the moment you stop. It needs time. It needs a gradual shift. And the same is true for your thoughts. If you fill them with intensity right up until the moment you lie down, they don't just switch off. They carry that energy into your sleep, and your body pays the price for it. The sixth thing I had to stop was something that looked like kindness from the outside, but felt like exhaustion on the inside. I had to stop saying yes to everyone and everything. For most of my life, I believed that being available, being helpful, being the person others could rely on at any time was a good thing. And in many ways, it is. But there is a limit, and I didn't know where that limit was for a very long time. If someone needed help, I was there. If someone asked for my time, I gave it. If there was a responsibility that needed to be handled, I stepped forward. And at first, it felt meaningful. It felt like I was doing the right thing. But slowly, something began to change. I started to feel stretched thin, tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. There was a quiet resentment that began to build, not toward any one person, but toward the constant demand. The problem wasn't that people were asking too much. The problem was that I wasn't setting any boundaries. I had convinced myself that saying no would make me selfish, that it would disappoint people, that it would change how they saw me. But what I didn't realize was that by saying yes to everything, I was slowly saying no to myself. One day I reached a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore.
I felt drained, not just physically but emotionally.
And I understood something that I should have learned much earlier. You cannot give what you do not have. If your energy is constantly being handed out without any care for how it's replenished, eventually there is nothing left to give. So I began to say no. Not harshly, not with anger, but clearly. And it felt uncomfortable at first. There were moments of silence on the other end of the conversation. Moments where I could feel the expectation that I would change my answer. But I didn't. And over time, something shifted. The people who truly cared about me understood, and the ones who didn't began to fall away. That's something people don't always want to accept. When you start protecting your time and energy, you also start seeing who respected it all along and who didn't. And while that can be difficult, it is also freeing, because it allows you to invest yourself in places where that energy is returned, not just taken. And finally, the seventh thing I had to stop was waiting for the right time to live my life. This one is the quietest of all, but also the most dangerous. Because it doesn't feel like a mistake while you're doing it. It feels responsible. It feels patient. It feels like you're planning. I spent years telling myself that certain things would happen later, that I would enjoy life more when circumstances were better, when responsibilities were fewer, when everything lined up just right. But life doesn't line up that way. It moves, whether you act or not. And while you're waiting for the perfect moment, time is quietly passing in the background. I learned this lesson in the hardest way. There were plans I made with people I loved that never happened. Trips we talked about for years that were always pushed to someday. Conversations we thought we had more time for. And then one day, that time was gone. That is something you don't fully understand until you experience it. The realization that you were waiting for a moment that was never guaranteed.
That the right time you were hoping for was simply the time you already had, and it slipped by while you were looking ahead.
So I stopped waiting. Not in a reckless way, not in a way that ignores responsibility, but in a way that honors the present. If there is something that matters to you, something that brings you joy, something that connects you to the people you care about, don't keep placing it in the future as if it's safer there. The future is not promised, it is only imagined. What you have is now. This moment, this day, this opportunity to choose differently, to let go of what is quietly taking from you, and make space for what actually gives something back. I have lived long enough to see how small habits become entire lives, how quiet decisions become permanent outcomes. And if there is one thing I would want you to take from everything I've said, it is this. You have more control than you think, but only if you are willing to see clearly and act honestly. Stop the things that are slowly taking your life away, even if they feel normal, even if they feel justified, even if everyone around you is doing them. Because in the end, it won't be what everyone else did that shapes your life. It will be what you chose to continue.